and you're going to make an array of fish. So that's going to look like this. Fish square brackets, array gets new fish, square brackets, total fish. Okay? So now what I have here is I have an array of fish references. Okay? So in this example, I have an array, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? I have an array of 5 fish references with each one of these being null. Okay? So what I need to do ultimately is I need to make a fish object and stick it into that array. Okay? So how do I make a fish object and stick it into that array? So I'm going to mute this for a second. That didn't mute it. Mute. Alright. So I've built the array number 1. That's the first thing you do when you come into the method. You build the array. Okay?
Could we use like the fill array method from the two-array lab?
Probably not, because it's a little bit different, right? But it's not that hard, right? So we're going to do a for loop. Okay? And in that for loop, what we're going to do is we're going to do a string temp gets fin dot next line. Okay? And so what that's going to read for me in this case is rainbow trout, comma, 1.23 or whatever the stupid weight is. Okay? That's what's going to be in temp. So temp is going to be a string that literally is going to look like this. Okay? It's going to look like that as a string. So I need to break that string into 2 parts. I need to break it into the part that is the rainbow trout of the type, and I need to break it into the part that is the weight, right? Might there be a method that takes a string, splits it into 2 unique values in this example, each has their own element inside of an array?
Yeah.
Might there be a method that might do that? Maybe there isn't. Maybe I should go on to a different class. What do you think, Garrett the Bleeder? That's a great name, right? No, but that's gonna stick, man. Garrett the Bleeder.
It's a good Viking name.
I can see it right in front. I can literally see like where's the split. Do we use that?
So if you take split,
Salad.
and if you say temp dot split on the comma, it's literally going to give you that as an index 0, that as index 1. You're obviously going to have to store this in some kind of string, square brackets, result type of thing. Okay? Now, there's a problem when you split, in that, remember, it's rainbow trout, rainbow, comma, space, 1.23. So in this will be the space. Okay?
Can't you somehow base it out so add space for the comma?
Is there some way I might be able to trim the fat
It's almost like
of space off of that thing? Yes, Garrett, or Jacob, whatever the hell you use.
Could you, inside the split, just do comma space?
Or I could do result sub 0 dot trim. That may or may not work, but will.
That's
a great thought.
But I have to store that back in, because notice that trim term returns a string. So in this case, what I want to do is I would want to say res sub 0 gets res sub 0 dot trim, res sub 1 gets res sub 1 dot trim. Okay?
Is this all in the for loop?
This is all in the for loop.
Okay.
Okay? Now, is there some way I might be able to take a double, that's a string, is there some way I might be able to take a double and have it converted from a string
Parse double.
into a lowercase d double?
Parse
Again, I'm not sure, but I'm
Hey.
thinking there might be.
Parse double is that's a capital case double. I guess.
So in that case, what I think I would probably do is I would say something like double D1 gets double dot parse double res sub 1 or even res sub 1 dot trim, right? Doesn't matter. Like so, and I would now have a double out of it. I'm not sure that's going to work, but I am. Okay? So now what do I know I have? Ian, what do I know I have? Are you paying attention, Ian? Do you care? Don't care, right? What do I know I have at that line of code right there?
String and a double.
Right? The string's in what, though? Res sub 0, and the double D is the weight, right?
And it's in the following element?
What's that?
Is it in the following index then?
Res sub 1 is the weight as a string.
Right.
D in this case is the weight as a double.
Okay, gotcha.
Right? So now at this point I might do something like this, say array sub x or whatever the variable name is for your for loop gets something like new fish res sub 0 dot d or comma d, which is going to call the appropriate explicit value constructor of fish, build a fish object, and shove that fish into the array.
When you
You
just
wave it at me?
Yeah, a little bit. When you're saying sub x, are you saying like so for
Whatever the counter is for the for loop.
for in x?
Yeah, whatever the counter is for the for loop. Whatever you're going to use. I don't give a shit.
And then you have to end the for and then afterwards you're done the for loop.
And then you're done with the for loop, right? And then you got to return the array.
Wait.
Is that res sub 0 comma D in the parentheses?
D,
Yeah, comma D though.
comma D is
Yeah.
in dog,
Yeah.
David, Delta,
Delaware.
Dynamics,
Yeah.
dishwasher.
Isn't it intentional that
Yeah,
you
theory
didn't
double.
mention a for conditions? It's just a for. and
There's
then-
a for loop somewhere, yes. This is all in the for loop.
But there's
And then
no-
outside the for loop, you're going to return array, right?
Yeah, okay.
You gotta fill the condition of full loop yourself.
Kyle?
Yeah, after we like finish the array sub x, do we have to like set res and d back to 0 or default values or whatever?
No. Because it's, remember it's constrained at curly brackets of that loop, so it's just going to get replaced next time you run through it.
Okay.
Other questions? Yes,
Where is this method being written?
in fill array method, in the methods class. Don't look at me like I'm completely talking a foreign language again. It's going to be right here inside the methods class.
That was long, it's the double.
We gotta write a fish class from scratch, right?
You got to write a fish scratch class from scratch, but this is right here in this method right here.
Oh,
Okay.
forgot about that.
Enrique, man, how you doing? You recovered?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Wait.
What's up?
We can go over that one more time.
Okay. So in the for loop, we read in a fish. We read in a line from the file. Okay? We read in a line from the file. We take that line and we break it apart into two elements in an array, right? Based on the comma. And index 0 is the type, and index 1 is the weight. We convert the weight from a string into a double. We build a new fish object and we shove it into the fish array. Think of the fish array like your fish tank, right? A fish tank at home. went to the store, I bought a new fish. Now I'm gonna dump the fish into the fish tank. Right?
I got some fish in my drawer.
Yes, sir.
Can we use a well?
No, you have to absolutely, yes, I don't care. You can use a while. Yeah, you can use a while. You can use it for a while, I don't care. Yes, why?
Yeah.
And you had your hand up, sorry, I get back to you, sir.
On the line of res of 0 gets res 0 dot, what is that after that?
Trim.
Trim.
Like you gotta trim your hair. Aiden, you had a question earlier.
What I was going to ask was for us to go through it again one more time, which just happened.
Oh, so. Damn Enrique, you stole his thunder.
Oh, it's perfectly fine.
Other questions? Anybody watching the YouTube channel that Garrett's doing?
I use it once out of desperation. It's actually pretty reliable, I gotta say.
Well, the lecture's recorded, I mean, I'm hoping it's reliable. Other questions? Okay, should we talk about comparative?
Yes.
Can I do it under the guise of course?
Do you do it under a gun fish?
No. Can I do it under the guise of course?
Oh, like
The
a
course
new-
thing I gave you yesterday in class?
Oh, fuck.
What?
I wasn't here yesterday.
Here,
Sucks to be you.
take a
man. Watch
picture on the
YouTube.
front and then take a picture of the back.
Garrett's got a YouTube channel just for you.
Oh, okay.
And then the back is what we actually did in class yesterday.
Okay, so remind me what the purpose of equals is again.
Compare
Lane, go ahead.
To compare non-primitives to each other.
For equality?
Always equality.
You go.
So
There's
make
a
you-
difference between equality and equity?
Of course there
Yes and no.
So the idea of equals are to see if the contents of two objects are the same. Okay? So if we have two fish, are they the same type and are they the same length? Right? We can literally have two objects be exactly the same depending on what we choose to put into our equals method, right? We only put it, everybody's equal based on your weight and your gender and your age and whatever else matters nothing, then a lot of us would be equal to each other. Nobody would be equal to me because I'm fat. I'm big bone, sorry. I said the word fat, I'm big bone. So the idea of equals is based on what we want to check, are two objects' contents the same in our definition of what equals is? What's the idea of compare to?
To compare two things.
To arrange in some order. Okay? The idea of comparing is to order them. Compare to is nothing more than about order. So I'm going to ask this first front row to stand up. Everybody stand up and stand in front of your desk and face the room. Okay? Aiden and Ian, I want you to compare yourselves on height, and the smaller one stays on the left. Okay, so Ian on the left, my left.
Your left.
My left, your left, not their left, okay? So now Ian and Enrique switch places. And Enrique and Aiden are probably the same. Kelly and Ian switch places. Kelly and Enrique probably switch places. Yes, Enrique's taller than you, Kelly.
I'm telling
And probably Ian, I'm gonna say you're taller than she is too, so switch places with Kelly. So, right? So that's what we're doing. We're comparing them based on height. Keep going on. I shouldn't have to tell you how to sort yourself based on your height. Okay? We're gonna say Jacob's smaller than you, shorter.
Yeah.
Okay? So look, there we go. Based on the fact that we had a compare to method based on a person's height, we can then order our objects based on that compare to method. You can all sit down, thank you very much. So the idea of compare to is nothing more than to determine order based on the objects. Okay? One object is less than another object based on whatever our specification is. Hi.
Hi, sorry, didn't want to interrupt you, but I just
No,
wanna
go ahead.
check something. So, where the equals method is checking the contents of objects to see if they're equal to each
What?
other,
I'm
the
sorry, go
compare to is basically creating a relationship between the
Correct,
content?
compared to is checking for a relationship,
Okay.
right? Is one object less than or greater than or equal to another object,
Okay.
right? We are using compared to, excuse me, for what is defined in the Java API as the natural order, okay? And typically that means ascending order. So in our case here, we did ascending order on height for everybody. Right? So the natural order in our compared to in this example I just did was based on person's height.
Okay.
So in a course, we're gonna do it a little bit differently, but I'm just trying to get you to imagine the concept of what we're doing here. We're gonna look at two objects and we're gonna say this object is before this object, whatever before means, okay? So I don't wanna say less than because it's not less than, it's just we've determined this object is natural order before this object, whatever that natural order is, okay? So to do that, we must put on the method header implement comparable with a capital C. Okay? Okay. What this line of code means, purely nothing other than this. My class will have a compare to method. That's what implements comparable means. My class will have a compare to method. Okay? So that means that in this class, I'm going to put it up top here so I don't have to scroll up and down. But in this class, I'm going to have a compare to method. So that is going to be at override public int compare to. Okay? Now, we are going to have a parameter inside of these parentheses. The question that we have to ask ourselves is what kind of parameter do we want? And what do I mean by that? Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to grab the old equals method for a second. I'm going to grab it, I'm going to bring it up here, and I'm going to throw it right under the compare to method so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so obviously compare to method. So what did we have to do on those three lines? In particular, line 19 in this case right now. What is the purpose of line 19? Sydney, go ahead. Say it loud, say it proud.
To make sure that object is.
To make sure that OBJ is a course in this example, right? Because if OBJ is anything but a course, we're out. Right? Okay? We call this, line 19, we call that a very catchy phrase. RTTI, which stands for Runtime Type Identification. Okay? RTTI. What that means is during the run of our code, we are determining that this is or is not a course. Okay? I don't know about you, but RTTI sucks. Okay? Because, hey, is there a way I can make the compiler say that's not right over me having to write code for it? And the answer is yes, okay? But here's an important point. So implements comparable by itself simply means I am going to have a compare to method, okay? That compare to method will have final object obj as its parameter. And we will have to do runtime type identification, okay? So that's choice number one, and that is a perfectly valid choice. It's a dumb choice, but it's a perfectly valid choice. Because what we can do is we can say, hey, instead of doing RTTI, let's do CTTI.
Wait, what's different?
C stands for compile time type identifier. The compiler is going to say, yeah, no. Sorry, that's not a course. So the compiler can do the checking for us, and we never have to do line 19 in our code. Okay? For the compiler to do that, we need to change final object obj into final course another, or whatever the class is, right? So we need to change it from final object obj and us doing the check on like line 19 into final course another, which is exactly what you see here on line 21. So if we want to do finals object obj, we're going to have to do line 19 and we're going to have to do line 21. If we want the compiler to do it, we don't have to do any of this crap. We don't have to do this. We just say final course another right here. Which one would you like me to teach you?
Option
Second
2.
one. Yeah.
Sure?
Yeah.
Okay?
No, the generic is well generic, so it's much more applicable overall.
So to do that then, we call this the generic. I don't know why, but we do. Okay? And so what we do is after implements comparable, so implements comparable means compare to method with final obj and runtime type identification. You convert it from runtime type identification to compile type identification. I say implements comparable, angle bracket, course, the name of the class, angle bracket. Okay? This now says, hey, the parameter coming into compare to must be a course parameter.
Is the angle bracket the same thing as the greater than less than?
Greater than less than angle brackets, alligator mouse,
Okay.
alligators. Who asked me that? Okay?
Wait,
Okay?
weren't you supposed to put final object obj into the?
When I do this right here,
Do that.
this becomes the name of the class and another.
Okay.
Okay? So this right here specifies that this has to be of the same class type. Okay? This is a compile time check now. Because now in main, if I say if one dot compared to stew as a string, the compiler is going to go, yeah, sorry, no. Can't do that because you're not passing in a course object. Right? So, and I can show you that here really quickly if I can open this up. Hang on. Okay. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say if array sub1 dot compare to stew as a string, okay, is less than 0, we'll talk about what that means in a minute, then whatever, right, doesn't matter. We're going to compile this, and the compiler is going to say, yeah, hey, nope, sorry, you're trying to pass in a string, and in the class, you've specified, because of this right here, you've specified that it has to be a course object. So I'm not even going to let it compile. Right? Go ahead.
Is there an instance where you would want to compare things that are from other classes?
No. Yes, but no, not in this class. Okay? We are trying to determine, this is a great question, Aiden, it really is. What we are trying to determine is if I have a bunch of this class, right? If I have a bunch of classes for course in this case, I want to order them based on my determination of the natural order for a course. Okay? I don't want to intermix fish or what stocks or whatever. I'm only worried about courses. So I'm only worried about the natural order for course. We can worry about other stuff elsewhere, but inside of this class, we're only worried about natural order for course.
Can you have compared to for more than one
No.
variable day?
Yes, you can have, no, you will only have, the compare to method will always have this as a method header if you use the generic. If you use the generic, it'll always be public int compared to final, whatever the class is, another. If you choose to not use the generic, this stuff in highlighted, then it will be public int compared to final object obj. That's your two choices. Okay, there's no other choices. You'll never have additional parameters in the compare to method. It's one parameter, and it's always going to be, because we're always going to use the generic, the course type. Jacob.
Are there cases where the generic doesn't work? Where the
There's only one case the generic doesn't work. No. Null is a generic of any type, right? So we will always have the precondition to make sure that another is not null, right? Because that's the only one that where it will fail based on the type, right? So if another equal null, then we're gonna throw a new illegal argument exception. Like so, right? Yes, Blaine.
Can you go over value of real quick? Again?
So value of, okay, so purpose of value of in any of the classes, integer, double, like that, right? So if I have D, double D, 1, or D1 gets 1.23, right? That's a primitive. The point of value of, in this case, double dot value of, right, is to take that primitive and convert it into a capital D double object. So the point of value of is to take a primitive and convert it into an object of that type. Integer dot value of, double dot value of, character dot value of, is to take a primitive and convert it into an object of the same type. Other questions? That would then allow me to call the equals method, right? Yeah. So now we have to determine what that natural order is, okay? In this compare-to method, we have to determine what that natural order is. And that natural order can be determined by whatever our hearts desire. In the case of course, we have a course num, a course name, and a course ID, right? So we can say, hey, if the course names are the same and the course IDs are the same, like, you know, or if the course ID, let me do it this way. If the course IDs are the same, then we know we will not have duplicate numbers, so we can use the number. So if we want to use, hey, I'm looking only at CSCD classes, I want to put them in order from 110 down to 499, order them, right, because I have just a bunch of numbers. They all say CSCD in front of them. I can go CSCD 110 all the way down in order to CSCD 499, right? So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about determining what that natural order is. And again, we can do it based on whatever we want. Hey, maybe we have two with the same course number, but they have different names, so we could order them that way. Or we could order them based on the name, the number, and the ID, whatever. Okay? The important thing to recognize here, is the compare-to method is guaranteed by contract of Java, as you the programmer, to return a value that is less than 0 if A dot compared to B, whatever A and B are, right, of the type, that would say that A is before B. A number less than 0 says that A is before B in that case. So a value less than 0 guarantees that this one right here comes before this one inside the parentheses, okay? A value greater than 0 says that this one right here comes after this one right here, okay? So perfect example. Savannah dot compared to Stu, all lowercase, okay? Savannah, S-A-V, comes before STU. So if we said Savannah dot compared to Stu, that would give me a value less than 0, because Savannah is alphabetically in front of Stu in the dictionary, okay? Here, if we did Stu dot compared to Savannah, that would give me a number greater than 0, because Stu is alphabetically after Savannah in the dictionary. Thank God Savannah's in the front row with an S name, I appreciate that, okay? And then, hey, if they're the same, Stu dot compared to Stu, then hey, those are gonna be equal to 0, okay? But that's all we have for the comparative method. We are guaranteed it will be a value less than 0, it'll be a value greater than 0, or it'll be a value equal to 0. What we will never do in here, and I don't care who, if you taught it from somebody else, we will never have these god-awful if statements that say, if A dot compared to B is less than 0, return a -1. Okay? I've seen teachers teach it that way. I am never going to teach it that way. Okay?
It doesn't work?
No, it works, but it's shit code.
Okay.
And I will smack you if I see that code. Okay, I'm just flat out telling you. It is the world's worst code. To take something that is already less than 0 and make it -1.
And I know because I did 8 ifs.
Right? It's less than 0, use it as less than 0.
Yeah.
So that's how we're going to write this right now in the 5 minutes I have left. So we're going to go based on ID, which is a string, and we're going to go based on number, which is an int. Okay? So we're going to say, look, int res gets this dot course ID dot compared to another dot course ID. See you, Jacob?
See you.
Okay. So that's going to run off to the strings class. Course ID is a string. Another dot course ID is a string. We're going to run off to the strings class, and the strings class is going to give me back a number. Okay? There's only one number I give a shit about. And that number is 0. Okay? Because when that number is 0, what do I know? They're the same, right? So if they're the same, I can't compare just based on the course ID. So I'm literally going to put the next line of code that says this. If res does not equal 0, return res. Okay? I ran out to the strings class. The string class gave me back a -10. Here you go, I'm passing it along the way. I'm not going to convert that into a -1. I'm not going to convert it into a +1. I'm not going to convert it into a 0. I'm literally just going to kick it to the next guy that called. Right? I compare Blaine and Paul, and I get a negative value back. Okay, thank you. Here you go. Right? The only time I care is when they're the same. Because now I got to think about something else. Okay? You're both the same height. Now how am I going to worry? Right? So, and we're not talking, 6'2" and 2 3/4 inches and shit like that. We're talking, you're both 6 feet, right? You may or may not be, and I don't care. But now I got 2 people that are both 6 feet. What's the next one I'm probably going to order them?
Black.
Age, what? I don't see color in this class. They're all green to me, by the way. Right? I literally don't see color. I really don't. Right? I've seen good students be black, and I've seen bad students be black. I've seen good students be white. I've seen stupider students be white.
Yeah.
Color to me does not matter.
Yeah.
Do you have the ability, and are you a good hard worker? Right? Now, I might ask you your ethnicity if I have a scholarship opportunity and it's only for African Americans or blacks or whatever, that kind of thing. But that's just to help you out. But God's honest truth, I never see color in this class. And I never see gender in this class. Right? We all know men are much smarter than women, but I never see gender. I'm kidding. We all know it. Right? Okay. What's that? I don't give a shit about your gender, your age, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, right? Can you write frickin' code, and are you a hard worker? That's all I give a shit about. So if I happen to call you the wrong pronoun, I'm sorry. Please correct me. But all I care about is, can you write code, and can I teach you to write code, right? It's my job for you to not come in and say, oh, I already know how to write code. It's my job to say, hey, this is what we're doing here. Do you understand? Let's go forward with it now that you understand, right? So all we did here was say, hey, we know that the course IDs are the same. So if I'm looking at 2 people, when I have these people in the row here, and then I have 2 people the same height, my next guess would be I would probably order them by age, right? I'd make the younger person on the left, my left, and the older person on the right, type of thing. So that's exactly what we're going to do here, because on line 14 right now, we know that we have 2 of the same course IDs. So now we want to want to compare them based on the course number. And so we're just simply at this juncture then going to say, hey, at this juncture on line 14 now, or 15, we're going to say return this dot course num minus another dot course num, right? If this is CSCD 100 and another is CSCD 200, what's that going to give me back? Negative 100, right? If this is 200 and this is 100, that's going to give me back a positive 100.
Yeah.
If they're both course 100, CSCD 100, then it's going to give me back to 0, right?
Yeah.
I can do this in 3 lines of code over 9 lines of code if you're going to write a bunch of these shit in if statements. If it's blah, 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 return -1, return +1, return 0. That makes sense, does it or does it not?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay? We will have maybe a quiz on this shit tomorrow if I can remember.